findings to which the Premier was supposed to respond, or the proposed findings and remedial action.
Okay. And so if you go back to 2401, on the top,
Yes.
Advocate Cilliers then resends the letters that she had sent.
Yes, that's correct.
And you then say in 159 of your affidavit that as far as you were aware, the Premier was later provided with the information he needed to answer.
That is correct.
Right. And then, did you understand that the Section 7(9) notice was sent to the Premier and the MEC for the information, as pointed out by the PP in her email, or because there was findings against them?
Because there were findings against them.
And those were the findings that you referred to earlier on, were set out in the April 2017 report.
That is correct.
Okay. You then say the Premier responded to the Section 7(9) notice, as did the MEC and the accounting officer. At 161 of your report, beyond 2129.
That is correct.
And what happens when you get responses to Section 7(9) notices? Does your investigation stop, or does it still continue?
No, the investigation continues because that would be the Section 7(9) notices or responses to the Section 7(9) would invariably shed, light that needs to be taken into account in finalizing the report, specifically around the findings and the information relied on and so on. So the report cannot be finalized unless those, the responses to the Section 7(9)s have been taken into account.
Okay. I had asked you this question, but I see I jumped the gun a bit. In paragraph 163 of your affidavit, you say that the investigation file in its entirety had been sent to head office sometime in 2017.
That is correct.
Right. And can you recall precisely when in 2017?
No, I cannot recall.
Right. And then you took some time off from work between July and September 2017, correct?
That is correct. Yes.
And although you got some of the emails, you were not in the office.
Correct, yes.
And it was Advocate Cilliers who took the lead in providing head office with assistance.
Yes, correct. As far as the further investigation is concerned, yes.
Right. So what's subsequent in your affidavit is what you've been able to reconstruct from emails that's been made available to you for the most part.
Correct, yes.
Right. You then in paragraph 166 refer to a further report that Advocate Cilliers circulates on 8 August 2017.
That is correct.
Right. And this report, if one sees that SS 23-2402 is then provided to head office. More specifically, it's sent to Mr. Malawi, and others are CC'd in on it.
Yes, that is correct.
Right? And you did not assist in the report.
No, I did not. I was still on leave, on sick leave.
Right? And so what is attached to this email is the report which you see at SS24 at page 243.
That is correct.
And this draft, there are no findings of maladministration or wrongdoing on the part of the Premier and the MEC, correct?
That is correct.
And do you know how it came about that these were omitted?
I do not know.
But you then in paragraph 170 at 2131, you put out in this report there are still several other findings that exist, correct?
That is correct.
And those include?
They include that the accounting officer is guilty of improper conduct, gross negligence, abuse of power, gross irregularity, and maladministration. And that the rules regarding public-private partnerships, which were applicable, were not followed, and that the prices for the goods and services had been inflated, and that the allegations regarding the environmental legislation had been, whether it was breached, were not substantiated.
Okay. And if you go to page 2462 of this report, Mr. Samuel. The pictures of the gate, which was alleged to have cost 2.6 million, are still in the report, correct?
That is correct.
And the milking parlor that was alleged to cost 30 million is still referred to at 5.3.16. And if you turn the report, the page, you'll see the pictures there.
That is correct. Yes.
Right. Now, if you then go to the next annexure, which is SS25, you will see the email from Advocate Cilliers dated 21 August 2017.
Could you refer me to the, oh, all right, I've got it, yes.
Right, she says corrections made, but TT. What is your understanding of TT?
My understanding of TT was, there was a stage when you used TT to refer to the think tank, but later on when a task team was formed at head office, this TT also referred to that task team.
And there is then a further draft which is attached to this email.
That's correct, Chief.
You didn't have any involvement in this draft, did you?
No, I did not.
And you say that this draft, although it said September, it was circulated in August based on the email.
That's correct, Chief.
And did that draft have any findings against the Premier and the MEC?
No, it did not.
You then refer to what's called dashboard minutes, which is located at SS 27. Which is page 2499.
Yes, correct. I've got it.
And you refer specifically to page 2500. Which says that the final report had been submitted, await feedback from PII. You see that in the second column, number 1, second row. On page 2500, at number 1, it says EPC, which probably stands for Eric Crucilius, Vrede Dairy Project final report submitted.
That's
Await
correct,
feedback
yes.
from PII.
Yes, I see that.
And what's PII?
PII stands for Provincial Investigations and Integration. It's the unit to which all provinces report at head office.
That would be essentially Advocate Matlawi and a few other members who would be looking at the report, correct?
They were not attached to PII. PII was the unit that we reported to, but further, Advocate Matlawi would have been placed elsewhere, either in the PP's office or in another unit that did quality assurance for the PP.
So who was in charge of PII at that stage?
It's the executive managers. There were 2 of them. One was responsible for inland provinces and other one for coastal provinces. The one that we reported to was Advocate Reginald Ndo.
Okay.
Was in charge of the inland provinces.
And then you say that Mr. Ndau then submitted the report to Mr. Nemasisi. Who was Mr. Nemasisi?
Mr. Nemasisi was the senior manager for legal services at the time.
And he then sent the report back to Mr. Ndau with changes and comments.
That is correct.
And you see that from SS 28 on page 2503.
That's correct, Chair.
Right? And if you look at page 2512 specifically,
Yes, I'm there.
right? You make reference to a comment that is attributed. Sorry, I might have the wrong comment column. Just give me a sec.
It's now bigger. Can you see it? Okay, Kevin. Thank you.
comment, I may have the wrong comment, but in your affidavit, you've, I'll find the correct comment, but the one I was referring to is the one in section 174.1 of your affidavit where you say, Mr. Nemasisi comments, notes that if Treasury, which is not that one, my apologies, if Treasury issued a report on this with a recommendation, maybe we can ensure enforcement of such recommendations in the form of remedial action. You see that?
Yes, I see that.
And Advocate Cilliers' response, you've detailed as saying that the remedial action requiring the Premier to ensure the implementation of the findings and the recommendations by the Accountant General should be removed.
That's correct.
Let me just
If I may assist, the comment that the comment that you're looking for is on 2507.
2507. My apologies. I had it down as 25. Oh, thank you, Mr. Samuel. You know this better than me. You see that on that, right? And you say that on 174.3, and later on in the comments, Ms. Cilliers says that the remedial action requiring the Premier to ensure the implementations should be moved.
That's correct.
And that we see at and you then conclude, having looked at this, that in 174.3, that otherwise the findings of the September report is largely the same as those in the July report. Correct?
That is correct, Chair.
You had no part to play in this report.
None whatsoever.
And then Advocate Doe submitted this to the PP.
That's correct.
Right? And if you go to SS29, which you see at page 2525, the public protector sends it back to Messias and Doe and Nemasisi.
Correct, Chair.
And there's a specific request whether they can verify whether indeed this response captures the issues that was raised by the Premier.
That is correct.
You then include it in this chain because Mr. Doe seeks the Section 79 notice that was sent to the Premier, correct?
That is correct, Chair.
Right. Right. Now, Mr. Salmon, in the next couple of paragraphs, you refer us to a revised report. Tell us about that. We're at 177 of your affidavit on page 2133.
Yes, I'm there. That revised report had not been limited to the politicians only failing to take disciplinary action. My mind, they were implicated in the transactions because they had taken ownership of the project in public. And I was satisfied that there was no way that the accounting officer could not have been acting alone. Instead, he must have been acting under political direction from the Premier and the MEC. I accordingly concluded that those political office bearers were culpable in the accounting officer's maladministration, negligence, and misconduct.
And so what did you do, Mr. Samuel?
I prepared a revised report reflecting my conclusions that I've just referred to, making findings against Mr. Mkhwebane and Mr. Zwane that they should be held liable, not only for failing to discipline the accounting officer, but because they had overall responsibility for the project, the manner in which it had been implemented and the extent to which it had failed the beneficiaries. I submitted that report to the head office, specifically to Mr. Ndo, as far as I can recall. In that report, I basically disobeyed the directive from the public protector that we should not make findings against the politicians. I felt strongly that they were responsible for the, for the project, and that findings have to be made against them. And I based those on the evidence that we had discovered, as I said earlier on, from a number of sources. And the unfortunate thing is that when my emails were recovered, we could not find this email, and under cover of which I would have sent that report.
And would you have provided that report to, Mr. Samuel?
I would have addressed it or sent it to Mr. Ndo, to my line manager.
And what do you think happened to that report?
I have no idea. Without the benefit of verifying from my emails, I can only speculate that it was specifically excluded, or those findings were removed from that report.
And to who do you recall sending that report?
My recollection is that I sent it to Mr. Ndo.
And can you recall more or less when you sent it?
No, I cannot recall.
When you returned to office in September 2017, did you have any further involvement in the Vrede Dairy project?
No, I did not.
So did you have, you were not involved in finalizing the report in February 2018?
No, not at all.
And the changes that was made to that report were not discussed with you in any way?
No.
And you know in paragraph 183, the findings in the final report that departed from the earlier conclusions that had been reached.
That is correct, sir.
Okay. And can you detail that for the committee?
Specifically, the complaint had alleged that the processing equipment, the cows, and construction and administration services had been procured at inflated prices. that the department had indicated that it had spent 6.2 million on cows, 2.6 on the security gate and the guardhouse, and 30 million on the milking parlor. We had concluded that the prices of the milking equipment, the cows and the gate and guardhouse had been considerably higher than the prevailing market prices. And these conclusions were based on the evidence we received from the independent sources involved in the industry, specifically the South African Holstein Breeders Association. That, for instance, they indicated that only 3.3 should have been spent on the cows and 7.2 on the milking parlor. And our own inspection of the simple infrastructure comprising the security gate and the guardhouse revealed that the structure should not have cost more than 50,000 rand, as opposed to the 2.6 million that was allegedly paid for that house.
Those were the pictures you had included in the report that has been removed.
That is correct. Those were the pictures that we included. That we were also satisfied that there was sufficient reliable evidence to make findings on the other items that were alleged by the complainant to have been overcharged. But the PP concluded that a finding could not be made due to the fact that there was no procurement process for it, and the public protector could not test the markets to determine the market values of goods and services procured without the necessary documents which prove the actual price for the goods and services procured. And this was in complete ignorance of the independent information acquired from the Breeders Association, which rendered it unnecessary for the office to take further steps to test the market. I have no idea why this information was ignored. Furthermore, determining the value of the security gate and the guardhouse did not require specialist input. It was basic construction of a rudimentary structure, and the April 2017 report included the pictures that we had attached to the report, which are reflected in page 2137 of my affidavit.
And that's the structure that they attributed the cost of 2.6 million to?
That is correct.
So these are the photographs, or some of the photographs that you say were included in earlier reports that was removed from the final version.
That is correct.
Then in paragraph 184 of your affidavit, you refer to the final report stating that there was an inability to investigate certain issues due to capacity and financial constraints. What do you know about that?
I do not agree. I did not agree then, and I do not agree now. I was of the view that the investigation was not hampered by any capacity or financial constraints. We were perfectly capable of determining some of these issues. As I said, we consulted some experts, which was done for free. So there was no need or issue about finances, to be dispensed in obtaining that information. And that information was included in the April 2017 reports and a number of other versions of the report. And we conclude, therefore, I conclude that the external forensic investigator was not required because we could scrutinize the financial records sufficiently. And prior to this, I'd not been told, I was never informed that the public protector required additional external forensic expertise.
Now, let's deal with the issue of beneficiaries, because the final report records that the beneficiaries who were intended to benefit from the project could not be investigated due to a lack of information.
Yes.
Were you able to track down the beneficiaries?
Yes, we were.
And would it have been a tremendous exercise to do that?
No, not at all. We were in contact with the beneficiaries through their leader, who subsequently died, was killed. And we had the list of the beneficiaries. We even, when we went for the inspection, inquired whether, from the public protector through her PA or secretary, I don't quite understand, but it's Ephraim Kabinde, whether the PP during that inspection would require the presence of the beneficiaries. And her response was that they were not required.
Okay. And that response you see at 2529 at annexure SS30, where it was indicated that there was no need to invite the complainant and the delegation beneficiaries to the inspection, correct?
That is correct.
Right. Do you think the input of the beneficiaries would have added anything additional to the report? You deal with that at 187.4.
No, I do not think they would have had any value to it.
Why do you say that?
The nature of the complaint, they would not have shed light on the nature of the complaint itself. They were just the beneficiaries. To that extent, we agreed, although perhaps maybe for different reasons, with the public protector, that there was no need for the beneficiaries to be present at the inspection. They were at the tail end of the project.
And effectively, they hadn't gotten any benefits.
Yes, they have not.
So you essentially agreed with the public protector
that is correct.
The report wouldn't have added anything to the public,
That's correct.
to the report. When the report was set aside and the matter was going to be reinvestigated, who conducted that investigation?
The investigation was then done from, it was done at head office. My information is that it was done by Mr. Rodney Mataboge, with one of the chief investigators.
You were not involved in that investigation at all?
No, I was not. We were not involved at all as the state office.
Is there anything else, Mr. Samuel, in respect of the Freire investigation that you wish to add?
No, I cannot think of anything.
Now, Mr. Samuel, we sort of started in the middle of your affidavit, right? And if we could then go to what you give me a second. Just after that, because we are there, you at 214. Oh, you describe your personal circumstances since submitting the initial affidavit.
Yes, that is correct.
Right. And essentially, you had submitted an affidavit previously to the Speaker of the National Assembly, and the affidavit was deposed to on 11th February 2020.
That is correct.
That's fine. And what informed the submission of that affidavit to the Speaker of the National Assembly?
I had, prior to submitting that report, I had made inquiries about the escalating, well, about the fact that our office was getting involved more and more in litigation, and that the other programs were suffering as a result. I had made inquiries regarding, the legal fees or the litigation that we were involved in as an office, and requested information on why we were involved in that and how much money was being spent. Because from the cursory look at the reports that were submitted to the management committee, to which I sat in, there was a standing report on finances, which at the time indicated that we had budgeted 10 million for legal fees or for litigation. And by the time we had almost doubled. It was somewhere during the middle of the month or still early of the financial year. We had almost doubled the expenditure relating to that, and another amount, I think I recall, it was around 6 million had been set aside, or had been ring-fenced to be paid within that financial year. So those were the issues, amongst others, that worried me, that necessitated that I end up approaching the Speaker with a request to do an investigation into the Office of the Public Protector and the conduct of the Public Protector.
Right. And if we go to the bottom of 189, you then say there was severe, sorry, I'm at page 2140.
Yes.
Right. You say there were severe professional consequences for you.
That is correct.
Right. So let's take it from the top. You write this letter, or you do this affidavit in February 2020, and you then say in the next paragraph that you then write to the acting CEO in March 2020.
That is correct.
And you once again raise the issue of the expenditure on legal fees and request documentation.
That is correct.
And you refer, the annexure you refer to is at page 2198. And maybe tell us, the acting CEO at that time is a Miss Mkhwebane, right?
That is correct, Chair. Miss Yalekile Lusibane was, in fact, the Chief Financial Officer, but at the time she was the acting CEO at the time that I wrote this letter.
Okay, and you refer to an interview that the public protector had given. Tell us about that.
As I recall, it was the day before I sent this letter, but I'm subject to correction. The public protector was interviewed by Mr. Thabo Mdluli of Newsroom Africa. And the question that worried me that he had posed to the public protector regarding the expenditure on legal fees and he asked who was responsible for the decisions regarding the expenditure, and her response was that she's not involved, it's not her decision, it is actually the accounting officer who has that. That is why I then decided to direct this letter the very following day to the acting CEO as the accounting officer.
And what information did you seek? If you turn the page.
I wanted a detailed and complete list of all matters that the Public Protector South Africa as an institution has been involved in since October 2016. Details of how much money has been spent on each of these cases in respect of legal fees up to that date, who were these legal fees paid to, and what they were for. What policy had been used to determine which case to litigate on, and what informed the decision to litigate in each case. I also inquired what the current status of each of those cases was to date, and who had instructed that such litigation be entered into, and what the budgets were for legal services and litigation since October 2016. I received an acknowledgement of this letter from the acting CEO, but I never received that information.
Okay. You then on the next day, if you go back to 2141, you addressed a letter to the public protector.
Yes, that's correct.
And what was the reason for that letter? What sparked of that letter?
I basically asked the public protector, or I requested her to resign. It was at the back of the recent judgments in which the presiding officer had been scathing about her conduct.
And did you get a response to the letter?
No, I did not.
And a copy of that letter, one sees at 2536. I don't think it's in this letter that you appeal to her to resign, correct? It's at 2536.
That is correct.
And then the following day, there were various charges, disciplinary charges brought against you.
I think there might have been an error in stating it like that. The charges came at a later stage. What happened the following day was that I was, when I got to the office and I tried to log in into the server, to get my emails and so on, I had been blocked. And so I made inquiries to the CEO. That is not reflected here in these paragraphs. But as to why I had been locked out, and that I considered that to be constructive dismissal. Instead, I was then served with a notice of suspension on the same day. And my laptop was taken away from me. The charges came a few days thereafter.
Okay, so what submitted from 192 is that on 11th March 2020 you were suspended.
That is correct.
And you say one of the charges dealt with a Limpopo assault that was described in the initial affidavit. What is the date of that assault that occurred? Do you recall?
Yes, I do. It was the 14th of December, 2011.
You were now being charged in 2020 for an assault that was alleged to have occurred in 9 years prior thereto.
That is correct.
And maybe without belaboring it, just tell the committee briefly the circumstances of what had occurred in 2011.
On the day in question, it was early in the morning, around just after 8. I was sitting in my office on the first floor of the building we were in at the time, in Polokwane, where I was the provincial representative at the time. And I then got a call from the receptionist internally to advise me that the complainant, Mr. Siabi, was at the reception and he demanded to see me. Because I was busy with the head office, I was on the line talking to one of the officials in the HR, explaining the reports that I had submitted. And the next thing, Mr. Siabi barged into my office. And he initially sat opposite, myself, but I could see he was agitated and angry. So when I finished on my call, I then told him that I can't see him on the day because I'm busy with reports. I actually suggested to him that I can see him late in the afternoon around 2 or the following day. And instead, he just stood up and accusing me of making a stupid out of him. And he came for me and grabbed me by my clothes, by the collar. I tried to push him away, to let go of me. And that is when the struggle ensued. I actually managed to push him to, just outside the door. And there was another door with a sliding door, a glass door, which, he tripped on that and we both fell because he was still holding on to me. And because of the commotion, the other officials within the office came out to investigate, and then they separated us and he, took him downstairs. I then reported the matter to the CEO.
And who was the CEO at the time?
CEO was Mr. Themba Mteto.
And what did he then do?
He then instructed me to go to the police station and lay a charge, and then to prepare a written report of the incident. And on the same day, before even my report could reach him, he had dispatched a private security firm, two, a male and a female officers to come and guard us and the building at the time. Okay. And that continued for some years. I don't know, I'm told now they are no longer there, but at the time they were there to protect us, or at least to ensure our safety and so on.
And you went to the police station to lay a charge.
That is correct. I went to the station, and on my arrival there, I found the complainant also laying a charge against me. The officer in charge of the charge office at the time, on noticing that we were there for the same or for a case or cases emanating from the same incident, then called us into his office and tried to broker some kind of an agreement that we should drop those charges against each other. The complainant refused. I was amenable to that because I was not particularly interested in laying a charge against an elderly person, which would take up most of my time going to and from court. But he refused. So both cases were then opened and sent to the senior public prosecutor for a decision. I think a day or two afterwards, we appeared at court, and the senior public prosecutor, withdrew both charges against us. He declined to prosecute basically on both cases. And that was at the time the end of the matter until later. That was in 2011. In between, nothing happened until 2017, when I had already moved to the Free State Provincial Office. I got a call from one of the investigating officers, because two ladies came from Mkhwebane to come and serve me, the police officials, to come and serve me with a summons to appear in court. Mr. Siabi had revived that case against me after complaining to the NDPP that the prosecutor was unwilling to see his case to finality. That's how it got to be reinstated. And I think finalized in the same year, 2017, where I was found guilty of common assault, sentenced to 2 months imprisonment or 2,000 rands, which was wholly suspended for 5 years. No, half of each, yes, was wholly suspended for 5 years. So I had to either serve a month of incarceration or pay the 1,000 rands. I opted to pay the 1,000 rands to secure my release, and within 14 days thereafter, I applied for leave to appeal, which is still pending. The matter sat once in the High Court in Mkhwebane, but because the trial record was incomplete, it was removed from the roll. But I've now been informed by my attorney that it has been completed. The reconstruction has been completed, and the matter is proceeding. I'm waiting for the date.
Okay. And that was one of the charges that you had?
That is correct. That's one of the charges that were brought against me in 2020 relating to that incident.
And there were also other charges?
There were other charges, yes.
And what did that relate to?
It related to, firstly, the affidavit or the request I had made to the Speaker to launch an investigation against the public protector and her conduct in running the office. And flowing from that affidavit, I was contacted by various media houses to confirm effectively whether I'm the author of that affidavit and the letter to the Speaker, and on the contents thereof. So I was then involved in those interviews together with the spokesperson for the public protector in the office, the Opas Khalwe. And so I was then charged with conducting those interviews, firstly, and then secondly, leaking or allegedly leaking my affidavit to the media and making disparaging remarks against the public protector. There were total 9 charges. Also insulting the public protector, breaching the Public Protector Act and the policies of the public protector, in mainly the grievance policy and procedure, in that I had taken my complaint to the speaker and not to the public protector. The others related, I think the other related to the breach of the confidentiality clause that I had signed. But at the end of it all, I was subjected to a disciplinary hearing, and in my absence was found guilty on 5 of those charges.
You didn't attend the disciplinary proceedings?
Yes, I did on the first day, which was in October 2020. The delay, the charges had been served on me earlier around March, but because of the hard lockdown, we could not sit. And then on the first day of the sitting of the hearing, I was there with my rep, union rep, and they led evidence from one witness, my line manager, and we could not finish. So it was then postponed to late November, spilling over to early December 2020. About 3 days before we were due to go back for that hearing, which was over 5 days, I then advised all the parties, the employer, the chairperson, and my rep, everyone, that I had been in contact with a relative who had been diagnosed positive for COVID-19. And in terms of the protocols, I had to isolate and I requested a postponement for 10 to 14 days. The chairperson wanted proof of that, and I said I would bring that proof on the date that the matter would be postponed to 10 or 14 days later. Because I was already in isolation at home, I could not go out, and he refused to grant the postponement, so the hearing continued in my absence.
And you were found guilty on the charges, and you were subsequently dismissed.
That is correct, yes.
You then took the matter up to the CCM.
Correct.
And you recently got a judgment from ruling from an arbitration award from the CCMA.
That is correct.
Right? And that came down on the 4th of July, 20.
It came a few days before, but it was effective. It effectively said, yes, I must report for duty on the 4th. I was reinstated that I should report for duty from the 4th of July, which I've done up until now.
And so effectively it set aside the disciplinary hearing.
That is correct, yes.
Right. When the assault occurred in 2011, were there any steps taken internally by the office? Did you provide a report or anything?
I provided a report as instructed by the then CEO, and he later came back to me to say the executive committee, EXCO, had discussed the matter and found that based on my report, there was no wrongdoing on my part, and so no steps would be taken. And that was the decision at the time.
That was related to you?
Yes, that was related to me.
Mr. Chief, it's 1 o'clock and it might be a good time to... I'm in your hands.
So I am keeping quiet. You're in my hands. Thank you, Advocate Bauer, for watching the time. We'll pause there, colleagues, and take a lunch break and be back at 2. Hopefully she will quickly wrap up Uh, let's take lunch
Recording
back at 2.
stopped.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.